So today, Loveland Beacon welcomes Evangeline DeVol, founder and current executive director of NEST, N-E-S-T, Community Learning Center, based here in Loveland, Ohio. And for those of you who haven't already heard of it or don't know for sure, and I'm going to take my shot at it, N-E-S-T, nutrition, education, safe environment, equal transformation, for your target audience, which is children in poverty.
Correct.
In our community. But today, it's kind of a new thing. A lot of people are aware of NEST here, especially, and even out in Claremont Northeastern, where your arm is extended to. They know what you've been doing for, what is it, 5 years now?
We're actually just started our 7th year.
Oh my gosh, I keep losing track. So starting the 7th year, but people are a little bit aware. But today, we're talking about something special that's kind of a new piece that NEST is involved with. So tell us about this thing called Children of the Perfect Storm.
Oh, I'd love to. First of all, make sure you call me Van.
All right, thank you. Van DeVol.
Van DeVol, there we go.
Those of us who know you and like you can call
right.
you that, right?
That's right, exactly. So Children of the Perfect Storm is a grassroots effort right now of getting like-minded nonprofits that deal with the same demographics, that is children in poverty, to come together and serve these children, work together. We still maintain our own nonprofits, our own, NEST would still keep its autonomy, that kind of thing. And so would these other nonprofits, whether it's CASA or Beach Acres or whatever it happens to be. They all serve these children in a different situation, because it's all very, very layered, children in poverty. And it's a collaboration to be a stronger voice, not only in the community, but with funders, and also even at the state level. And we want people to hear this one voice, because children now in poverty are still invisible to a lot of people, and they still don't have a voice. And that has to stop, because every single day, Chuck, this is getting worse and worse for these kids who had no control over what they were born into, the situation, where they were born, or exactly what's happening to them.
Right.
As we've talked about before, right now, and these are not my numbers, they're coming out of Columbus, we have 243,000 children in Ohio alone that can no longer live at home because home isn't safe. Whether it's because of opiates, because of depression and parents can't cope, whether it could be 100 different things. People in prison, it doesn't matter. But it's a layered problem, so we have to have a layered solution. And that's what the idea of Children of the Perfect Storm came. It's all based on, well, I can tell you where we got the name was from the book, The Perfect Storm.
I was going to say,
right.
let's talk for a second.
Okay,
and I want to give you a chance to say that, because,
right.
You and I have talked before.
Right.
You did a great presentation at the NEST's Dancing with the Stars. But for somebody who's new to this right now, and maybe listening in right now for the first time here on Loveland Beacon,
right.
The Perfect Storm comes from?
The Perfect Storm comes from in 1999. There was a little fishing trolley out of Manchester, Massachusetts, that went out to get a late season catch. And they actually were out looking for swordfish. They went out into the ocean, and unbeknownst to them, because through a whole series of things happening, like losing their radio and all this other kind of stuff, they got stuck in a once-in-a-lifetime colliding of storms. There was a nor'easter that came, a hurricane from the south, and another tropical storm that came, and it all merged, and everybody on that ship perished. But that's not just the story. In the meantime, we had all these first responders trying to get them help. We had all these family members that knew what were going on, and they were trying to figure out, how do we get involved in this and help our loved ones on this fishing boat. And it's a great analogy for what our kids are going through right now.
Yeah, the kids are
The
the
different
kids
storms.
are the crew on the fishing boat.
Exactly.
In the midst.
Exactly. And everything
Yeah.
coming together, before these kids were all in their own storms, whether it was in foster care or kinship care or being, having to deal, Dayton is the opiate capital of the United States. So regardless of what you think about what's going on with the border, all these opiates are coming up to Dayton. And it's easy to spread it all over the place.
The I-75 corridor.
Yeah, it's and as you also know that we're the number 4 state. We may be the number 3 state right now for trafficking children for sex in the United States because of this. When drugs and trafficking children and all this kind of stuff, all these things go together. Well, the most susceptible children that get stuck in that kind of system, a lot of them are coming from trauma, mostly bad foster placement or running away from a foster placement. The foster system's overwhelmed, and everybody needs help. So getting back to the children of the perfect storm, we've named this because all these children are in a storm of their own. And COVID made it the perfect storm because COVID made everything worse. Whether you are just one of our Nest little low-income kids who is struggling at school and was struggling and was so far behind at school, because typically low-income kids, for lots of different reasons, don't have the time to go over that, are typically 18 months to 2 years behind, typically.
Right.
Maybe not in all their subjects, but in a lot of them.
Well, you know what, and real quick, interject here, because of what Nest has been doing for the past 6 years, now into the 7th.
Right.
You're closing that gap.
We were doing a really great job until COVID got
Okay,
here.
right.
Yeah, and so we were still involved in their lives all through COVID. In fact, we did a very good job. We coordinated with the police and with Life Food Pantry and all these other places, and we became the Pony Express during COVID and got all this stuff out to the kids because we needed to stay in their lives. Because when you had families hunkering down. And it's not just Loveland, it's all in the news. There was more spousal abuse, there was more, you name it. Now we're in an economic storm. Everything's a storm where their food stamps or SNAP cards now don't get nearly what it used to, regardless of what the government's doing. It doesn't keep up with inflation. A lot of these families were struggling anyway. Now they're not getting enough they're not able to buy really nutritional stuff for their families. And just like you and I, when we go to the store and get something we've always had, and it's not on the shelf, it's happening the same thing with these families.
Right.
It's all watering down, and it's all coming down literally in the laps of our kids. And they're in trouble. And now we've got students as far behind as 3 and 4 years. And and how do you catch that up? It's not a one and done thing. It's not we can't snap our fingers. And then all the trauma they've gone through, a child that's gone through trauma does not learn the same way a child that hasn't gone through trauma. In our brains, our Center for Cognitive Development is exactly the same place the trauma goes after. So the more trauma has, the harder it is for them to learn on what we would call a normal pattern for their age.
Right.
In other words, that may explain that why we have a 5th grader who can only read on a 3rd grade level, and yet every indication says there's no reason that they can't. Well, if they've had a lot of trauma, or what we call ACEs, adverse childhood events in their life, the body's an amazing thing. It kind of shuts itself down to protect you, the fight and flight thing.
Right.
And when you come into a situation where you either have to decide you're going to run or you're going to stand and fight, your brain is amazing. It shuts down everything you don't need. I'm sure you've heard people saying everything I couldn't hear. All I could do is focus on what was. That's exactly what the body does. And the way the body does that is there's an enzyme in your brain called cortisol, and it raises up. If you're a child and these things that you come in contact are causing you stress, it's called toxic stress. your cortisol goes up. Well, when it goes up, it diminishes your capability at the minute to cognitively learn. It's all happening in the same place. So all those things together,
and exponentially, the numbers of children and the numbers of those adverse events increased, as you
absolutely.
said, which brings us back to, this is the perfect storm, and this is the reason that you're developing this program.
Absolutely, and we all get into this. I don't care what nonprofit is, because these kids matter. They matter, and somehow or another, we've lost that message because all of us are struggling. All of us struggle. Depression is up, suicide attempts, not just in low-income neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Eating disorders now are rampant. It's everywhere. But for our kids, they have limited resources. They don't have a lot of the support and education. And if they can, Children's Hospital is wonderful. But in some of the departments, you have an 18-month wait because they have to go there to be able to use Medicaid card. So you can't. This is not an effort to change all these little pieces that are It's to say we're going to be one voice. We're gonna work together. We're gonna sit around a table. All these nonprofits that come in and go, okay, what can we work on together that makes us each individually more effective? And I believe with all my heart that's what we need to do, and that it will be successful, especially if we get a reputation. And this is, I believe, a God thing for us, that as we go along and people hear about this collaboration, it will get a voice of its own. We don't just have to depend on each of us being our separate little nonprofits.
Right.
To get that word out. So that's why it's called the Children of the Perfect Storm.
As you and I sit here and talk about it right now, so what is happening? Well, maybe what has happened as you move toward launching this Children of the Perfect Storm program. What has happened? What is happening? And then what has to happen going forward? And when I say what has happened, what are some of I'm assuming you have some collaborators already. You've been in, I know Van DeVol.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have talked.
My drum.
I know just in our side conversation, for example, like the Beach Acres.
Right.
Those are people that serve children in poverty.
Right. That's the function I'm going to tonight. Yeah. They just moved their office downtown.
Right. Well, and then CASA you mentioned,
right.
which is another one for children,
right.
in jeopardy.
Right.
Those organizations and what they do and what you do. So, is there others besides them right off, that you could talk about right now that you're collaborating with already?
I am with the Varner Foundation for Children and Families. That's because I sit on their board at the same time that I'm on Nest. But we also, there's room at the table also for churches that have a lens on this, a program on this, that they may want to get involved in. There's I have through getting out in the community and talking, and obviously Nest is my number one thing, but people come up to me all the time and they tell me stories about what they're trying to do or what they're trying to get involved in. One wonderful woman who have written books about these kids, and she's an advocate now in court, that kind of stuff. And she's a lone voice still. So it would be so wonderful to get her at the table. And who does she know? And who does she not know? How can we affect the legislation to work towards these kids? Not necessarily to change laws, because none of us are in the business to do that. But just please consider us. We're over here. When we work out, Nest works out in Claremont Northeastern, we, or even here, as you know, we have an early learners program getting our kids ready for kindergarten. Because not all kids can go to Head Start, not all kids can go to preschool. Well, we don't even know they exist until we know they exist.
Right.
So there's tons of little 3s and 4s out there and younger, Nobody even knows they're around.
How do you come to know they exist? And I know you've done this,
Right.
you know.
The biggest way we come to know they exist is because we take our mobile classrooms and drive right where they live. And so there's two parts of Nest secret sauce, if you want to, if you will. We call it the secret sauce.
We're going to give up the recipe now.
Oh, no, we're not. Oh, no, we're not.
Okay,
no,
right.
But one of them is we take all the barriers away from the low income and the at-risk to get academic help. We know that food and clothing, shelter, medical care, terribly important for children. But the only thing that's going to change the trajectory of their lives is education. We know that. Every study, I don't know if it's a government study, it's a Harvard study, it doesn't matter what study. Everybody says a good job is what will break the back of generational poverty. The only way you can get a good job is to have a good education. So, and it doesn't just happen in high school with jobs programs. It happens way down here. But it's getting this to children in the suburbs and rurally that hasn't been a focus for a really long time. People don't realize that since 2012, there are more at-risk kids that live outside of the urban areas and urban centers than they do downtown in them anymore. And they come out to the suburbs for lots of different reasons. Schools are better, safety, but we don't have a bus system. We don't have a pantry that's open 24/7. We don't have the same safety net, if you will. We can argue all day long how good the safety net is in the cities, but we don't have any of that. When I taught in Over the Rhine, you could walk from the school I taught in a 10 block radius, and anybody that lived in that 10 block, they lived in community. Everybody was exactly the same, right? So everybody was on SNAP cards. Everybody had Medicaid cards. All this kind of stuff. You bring that population out to a suburb like Loveland, even Indian Hill has some, has some low-income housing, or someplace. All of a sudden, they're isolated. They're in this little island, and they don't have, because we as a community. It was great when we had the bus here, but we don't really need a bus system, the Metro bus, to come through. We, middle-class people, didn't know because we had a car. We don't need the food, the food pantry is not a great example because they are terribly needed for other circumstances.
Well, but no, you make a good point when you start to say we don't need a food pantry,
right.
Because the biggest percentage of the population in this suburban community isn't feeling that pinch, and not even necessarily aware of
Correct.
the neighbor who is feeling
Correct.
that pinch. So that's it's a fair point.
And there's two kinds of poverty, and people don't think about it. They know it when you talk about it, but one is generational poverty, but the other way is situational poverty. So if you lost your job because they've downsized or because of COVID or whatever, 80% of the people that find themselves in situational poverty will cycle out of it. But generational poverty is a whole nother, it's a way of life. It's a way of looking at things. It's a way that lens. It's a way, for instance, don't talk to a low-income mom about budgeting. They're lucky if they have enough money to get through. So let's be honest. So during COVID, when they didn't have to pay their rent or their electric bill, because they were told they didn't have to, they were told, but it didn't sink in, that these wonderful families that I love and adore, that we've now have been removed, that they had to accrue. Eventually, when all that was lifted, they're going to have to pay that back.
Right.
Well, we would go out into our low-income areas, and I've never seen so many Amazon trucks in our whole life, because we bumped them up to a artificial economic space, and so they
moved into a sudden middle class.
Absolutely, they did, and they wanted to be like everybody else. Do you blame them?
No.
So out of the goodness and love of our heart, we keep hurting these people. They're not doing it on purpose. We're trying to help, but sometimes I wonder, what are we thinking? So getting back to the children of the perfect storm. So we've got all these things happening to these kids. And it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then on top of that, we now have, because of the opioid crisis, because of all this stuff, more and more people on fixed income, grandparents who don't want their children in the foster care or kinship care system because it's failing. The people that work in it are amazing, but they don't have all the resources, they don't have anything that they need. But they don't want their kids grandkids put in foster care. So while their child's in, being treated for addiction or whatever it happens to be, they're taking on these grandchildren. Well, they never thought in a million years, being retired on a fixed income, they'd have to take care of these kids.
Right.
And so we have a new generation of poverty, of women and men in poverty, and it's the retired. That's why they're going back to a lot of like Walmart and all this kind. They have to know the choice.
Well, let's take it forward.
Okay.
You got about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
because I know you have someplace you need to be.
I do.
Who doesn't? But anyway, I want to respect your time.
Right.
And before I even go on to the next thing, Van, thank you so much for taking the time to
My
share
pleasure.
this story with Loveland Beacon, so that hopefully we can help you get the word out. But so take a couple of minutes to kind of sum up what you want to do and what your vision for the Children of the Perfect Storm program is.
My vision is that I would like to work as hard as I can on this, so that in the end, every child gets an opportunity to succeed, and have the tools that they need to succeed, whether it's help academically, or encouragement, or placement, or whatever it has to be. They need to have a voice. People need to know they're here, because really in the end, they're not somebody else's kids, they're our kids.
Right.
And if we know how we can help them, and we don't, then we put ourselves into the position of choosing winners and losers, and I don't think we have that moral right to make those choices.
What I hear beyond the, as Nest has been doing, going to them, but what I hear beyond that with the Children of the Perfect Storm program is a vision to advocate beyond that for them and all of them in all facets. I mean, you mentioned, for example, the person who has the connection in courts, advocating in court. You tell me what's advocating in court, advocating in the schools.
Learn about what it. So, for instance, the children that are now displaced, we've had single moms come and fill up their the kitchen with food, leave a note for the oldest kid that's in 7th grade, and said, "I can't take this anymore." And they wake up in the morning and mom is gone. The mental health issue is huge. The hopelessness is huge. All these kind of things. And if we come around and can support these families better than we're just throwing money at them, but other things, and there are a lot of people out there that do. But it's not just a one and done program ever. It has to be a long-term relationship, and there's lots of great organizations that try and do that, but none of us are doing it perfectly. We do need to come together. We do need to be a louder voice to be able to get the things that these family needs, and every family needs a little bit of something different. So it's not the reason that Nest is so successful, 2 reasons. The first is that we have a very unique way of approaching them as far as teaching, because we are trauma trained, because we know how the brain works, so that we go in with, we're just not helping you with homework or tutoring, we're supporting the whole child, socially, emotionally, the whole bit. But the other part is, our biggest thing is we're meeting the children where they are. All these one-size-fits-all government programs don't work. We need to meet that child, meet that family exactly where they are. And if we have everybody sitting around a big table that help in all these different avenues with the poorest and with children, we bounce stuff off. How can I help out you? How can you help me? How can we advocate for each other? How can we be a very, very strong voice? And that's my hope. My hope is that one day we're not needed.
Amen. And and on that note, the last thing, there's help needed.
Yes.
So how does an organization
Right.
or even an individual
Yes.
that wants to help or can somehow help, what's the best way for them to get
Well,
involved with
If
this?
they
children?
want to be involved in Nest, just send an email to nestlearningctr@gmail.com. Or if they want to talk about Children of the Perfect Storm, or they want to, get some ideas, we're in the very baby steps of this. They can email me directly at evangelinedevol@gmail.com, and it's EVANGELINEDEVOL@gmail.com. Or get in touch with you, and you'll send them my direction.
We'll point them in the right direction.
Yes.
Van, thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
You bet.